Now that we have the ability to log in via the application, let's go ahead and focus on the other thing, logging out. Once we can log in and log out, we'll worry about actually locking down data and handling things like redirecting the user around the application, depending on their auth status. For the moment though, we're just going to focus on adding a log out button, and I'm going to toss that button inside of our header component. So the header component is going to contain our private navigation. Right now it shows up on the login page. We'll fix that later. All we're going to do is add another item inside of the header tag. Right here, we're going to add a new button, and I'm going to call this button log out, setting the text value equal to log out, and there we go. So this is the button that's going to start the process for logging a user out. Now, if we're actually going to wire things up, we are going to make a few other changes. The button alone does need to actually do something. That's going to happen via another action defined in auth. The goal here is to use the companion method related to signing in, which is called sign out. So we could go ahead and set up an export, exporting a const start log out. I can set it equal to an arrow function. We can conform to the Redux thunk spec by returning a function. Then inside of here, we can get some meaningful work done. I'm going to use return to continue the promised chain. Once again, we're going to access firebase.auth, calling auth to get all of the authentication related functionality. And the one we're looking for this time around is .sign out. Sign out is going to sign a user out of the application. We do not have to provide any arguments to it. So with this async action in place, we can actually wire up header to use it. We're going to make that change over inside of a header. We need to import this guy, and we also need to connect header to Redux. Up above, we're going to get both of those things done by first importing the necessary tools. I'm going to grab connect from React-Redux, and then I'm also going to grab the thing that we just created, importing start log out, and I'm going to grab that from the file. I have to go out of the source components folder. From the source folder, I am looking for the actions directory. In there, we have auth. So now that we have everything imported, we can actually wire this up. For the moment, by default, we're exporting our non-connected component. We're going to have the connected version get exported there. So up above, I'll make sure to export this guy for testing purposes. So now that we have the export in place for that, let's focus on actually connecting this to Redux. I am going to use connect to get that done. We're going to add our two calls. The second one is the component we're trying to connect. We pass that in. The first one lets us define the pieces of state we need or the dispatchers we want to use. We do not need any state, so we can leave off the first argument. For the second one, I am going to provide a map dispatch to props function. Map dispatch to props. This is going to allow us to actually get start log out and use it in some meaningful way. Currently, we are using that variable without actually creating it, so we can define it right here. Const map dispatch to props. When we actually create this, we are just going to set it up to implicitly return an object. On there, we can provide all of the props we want to pass down, and we're going to have access to dispatch right here, which is great because we are trying to dispatch start log out. The only thing we're going to pass down to header is start log out. I'm going to set it equal to an arrow function that uses dispatch to dispatch start log out. Very similar to what we did in the last video. Now all we have to do is actually grab that prop and attach it to onClick. I can take the props argument, which is the first one, destructure it for start log out, and once I have that, I can just pass this into onClick. OnClick, what are we going to do? We're just going to go ahead and call start log out. Excellent. So the header component is actually all wired up, and clicking that button should actually have an effect on the application. Let's go ahead and actually test things out. I'm going to save the header file. The browser is going to restart. Hopefully two things happen. We get our logout button, which we did just get, and we get our login message, meaning we're currently logged in. So if we click log out, we can see what happens. I'm going to click it. And what do we get? We get log out printing to the screen. So this means we have successfully logged out of the application and we would no longer have access to that privileged information. If I did want to go ahead and log in again, I could just move through that flow. I click the login button. It adds the pop-up. I pick my Google account. Then once this process is complete, down below we see login again. Give it a second and there it is. So now we have the ability to log in and log out, and that stuff's not going to change a whole bunch. What is going to change is what we do when these actions actually happen. Before we get to any of that, let's go ahead and adjust our test cases for header. I'm going to close down all of the files except for header. Then I'm going to open up the header test file. In the test directory, we have components. In components, we have header.test.js. We're going to go ahead and tweak this based off of the changes that we just defined in the header component file. We're going to start this test case together, then we'll create some others, and you'll be doing those on your own. So to kick things off, we are going to grab the named export right here. And since we are now using a prop start log out, we should probably also go ahead and pass that in. So for our shallow rendering of header, I'm going to pass in start log out, and I'm going to set it equal to, and we could pass in anything. For now, we could just pass in an arrow function that does absolutely nothing. With this in place, we can save the header test file. Over inside of the terminal, we can give things an honest try by going ahead and running the test suite. Yarn test, and I will pass down watch to jest, making sure it starts and restarts, and we can see exactly what we get. Now, yes, we are going to expect this component test file to break because we are changing the snapshot. We added in a new button, and over here, that is exactly what we get. So we see that we do have the new button addition, something that wasn't around previously, and that's the only test case that's failing. We can accept those changes. Those are totally expected. I'm going to hit U. It should go through the test suite again, and this time around, we can see we have our one snapshot updated. Now that we have our snapshot test in place, I would like you to add a test case, making sure that when we click the button, the correct prop gets called. We're going to do that with spies. That test case would be something along the lines of should call start log out on button click. And I want you to add a companion test case, but for the login page. So for the login page test file, you're going to add should call start log in on button click. So those two test cases are going to be very similar. Add this one to this file and this one to the login page test file. And if you forget how to use spies and check if they're actually called, you can refer to the other test files or the previous sections and videos. Take as much time as you need to get this one done, and make sure your two new test cases are indeed showing up in the terminal and they are passing. Take a moment to pause the video, knock out those test cases, and when you're done, click play. All right, how'd that one go? To kick this process off, I am going to create a new call to test to create the new test case, and I'll stick with the exact text we added down below. Should call start log out on button click. Then I'm going to go ahead and set up the test case, and for this one you did need to use spies. So I'll be kicking things off by creating a new spy for start log out. The thing that we're trying to confirm actually gets called when the button gets clicked. Const start log out. And remember, to create a spy, we use jest.fn. We call it, it returns the spy, and then we can do something with the spy. In our case, we're going to pass it into header and try to click the button. So const wrapper equals right here. We are going to shallow render our component, that is header. This time around though, we are not going to pass in an empty function for start log out. We're going to set start log out equal to the start log out spy that we just created. Now there are just two things left to do. First up, we want to click that button. We can use wrapper.find to find the button by tag name button. Then we can go ahead and actually click it by using simulate. I'm going to simulate which event? I'm going to simulate a click event. The last thing left to do is to make our assertion. I am going to expect something about start log out, and in this particular case, I'm going to expect it to have been called. All right, I'm going to go ahead and save the header test case file. Over in the background, things should restart, and we are seeing an entirely passing test suite, which is fantastic. Now that we have this in place, I did ask you to do something similar for the login component. We can actually go ahead and take this guy and copy it over there to get that done. I'm going to take this one, save the file to remove those comments down below, and I am going to crack open the login page test file. Inside of here, we already have our first test case in place. I can paste this one and change it for our purposes. In this case, we're going from start log out to start log in. We are going to change the variable to start log in. I'm going to change it here, 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 and here. And then all we really need to do is swap out the component. Instead of rendering header, we're going to render login page. So this is going to create the SPY. It is going to pass it into login page. It is going to click the button, and then it is going to expect the SPY to have been called. I'm going to save the login page test file. The test suite should restart in the background, and we should see a new passing test case. I might have missed that one in the background. Over here, I can just use W and A to run the entire test suite just to give me that peace of mind that everything did actually run as expected. And there we go. It went through all of the test cases. We are ready to continue on. That is where we're going to stop for this video. We now have the ability to log in and log out. In the next one, we're going to turn our attention towards this guy right here. This is where we define what we do when we log in or log out, and there are things we want to do other than console.logging messages. If we're logging in, we want to make sure to redirect the user away from the login page to the dashboard page. If we're logging out, regardless of where the user is, we want them to get back to the login page so they can either leave the application or log in again. That's all coming up in the next one, so stay tuned and I'll see you then.